All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Tavern of Talks. Myself and Donovan here are going to be talking about board games today. Today, Donovan is going to be presenting Horrified. But before we do that, let's do my usual spiel. We are Tavern of Tales. We are an immersive board game bar in Boston that is closed currently for the pandemic, but we love board games and all our coworkers and everybody so much that we're kind of making sure we're all staying connected through different means. We have a lot of different streaming services besides Tavern Talks that we hope that you guys are able to stay entertained with, such as Magic the Gathering Arena with Tyler on Mondays and Thursdays at 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have our Shattered Lands homebrew campaign run by DM Jake, which also has myself and a couple of other DMs playing as PC characters on Wednesdays and Fridays from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we have another Tavern Talks talking about our Eberron campaign, which is what our game masters run on the Tavern of Tales D&D Discord server for all of you lovely people watching today who want to play D&D in the Eberron setting. We're having our Tavern Talks with another DM on Tuesday at 1 to 2 p.m. Our D&D Eberron campaign is now in its second season. We have begun. We have sessions tonight at 6, I think. So if you haven't already signed up or finished what you need to do for that, do it now or after the stream, But we do have our next signups for Monday and as well as games for, Tuesday and Thursday. So do sign up if you want to come in. Our second season is going to be looking really interesting and spooky. We are Twitch affiliates, so please feel free to follow and subscribe and show us how much you love us. It definitely helps us in this time. And do follow us on social medias such as Facebook and Twitter, besides just here on Twitch. If you have any questions, we'd love to hear them on Twitter. So if you have any questions for Tavern Talks when we have our DMs in, add us, and we'll definitely read them. Stay tuned for our reopening. And Donovan, if you're ready, I'm excited to learn about this board game called Horrified.
I am very excited to talk about Horrified. This is one of my favorite games. Came out last year. It came out around October, I believe. So perfect timing for the season. So, what is Horrified? Well, look at that. Oh, it's the most beautiful box art you've ever seen. If you can tell, Horrified is a cooperative strategy game for 1 to 5 players. It is based around the classic Universal monster movies from 1930s, 40s, and 50s. So, the Frankenstein movies, Dracula, The Mummy, Invisible Man, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Bride of Frankenstein, Wolfman, all those good characters that have a very, important place in our pop culture. So I'm a huge fan of these movies. I adore them. And I really was excited when this game was coming out because it's just such a love letter to those movies. And it bleeds and oozes the love for them. It is just all through it, just a fan creation. And it's so much fun to play and to look at. It's a wonder. So why don't we get into how it plays, though? Because not only does it just make me smile because it's such a fantastic representation of those classic monster movies, but it also is really, really fun with its gameplay. It's very creative and innovative in ways that a lot of mass market board games typically aren't. This is kind of like a mass market. It's around, I think, $30, and you can get it at like Target and Barnes and Noble and stuff like that. But it's such a joy.
Good. So, I know a lot of games are about $50 or more expensive. So Horrified's a nice, affordable price, and it looks so cool.
Yeah, it's so beautiful, and it's great because I said it's 1 to 5 players, and it's cooperative, so you can play it on your own in addition with up to 5 people, which is really cool. It just checks off a lot of boxes that a lot of those mass market board games don't often, which is what I like so much about it. Is it feels like a more expensive game than it is, and for that, it's such a discount for the price that you're getting it at. But yeah, why don't I get into the gameplay? I'll describe, how to play, how to lose, because it's a game where you can lose pretty easily. So yeah, we'll get started with that. Why don't we get started with how you win this game? So it's a game where you're going to be taking on the role of different types of people in a village in some sort of vague rural Ruritania in Eastern Europe. It doesn't really say, but you're going to be taking on the role of these different characters. So you have like scientists, explorers, archaeologists, professors, and you are being invaded by the classic Universal monsters, the big seven. There's a lot of different monsters from that time, but the big seven monsters, as I said, Frankenstein and the Bride, the Wolfman, Dracula, the Mummy, the Invisible Man, and the Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Wait, let me see that Invisible Man mini.
He is.
Hold that up to the camera.
He's tiny.
I love that.
Yeah, he looks great though, but it's the scale is a little strange, but I love him. So yeah, the goal is to push them out and to get rid of them and to save the village. You do that by completing different tasks and objectives. So the way that you win is by clearing the board of all the monsters. So whichever ones are invading in your game are the ones that you're going to have to fight back and clear within a certain time frame. What's interesting is the game has a kind of a ticking clock mechanic. It's not real time, but it is turn. So if you run out of time, then that leads to your loss. So yeah, the losing mechanics. What's funny about this game is that it is very simple with like how you lose, and there's a bunch of different ways to lose, but it's very complex with how you can win. So it really pushes you. And even though it's called Horrified, it's not really a scary game at all. It's more just fun. But it has that kind of element of like panic, which I really like. It adds that horror element, even though it's not really super present.
It has all that horror and camp that you enjoy watching in a camp movie without any of the scariness. So it's a safe environment.
Yeah, which is what I love so much about those old movies is that they're fun. They're more fun than they are scary, but they are sweet and emotional too. And they're just so good. And you love the monsters. So yeah, why don't we? So that's how you win, is that you have to push the monsters out. It's pretty simple with that. The way you do that's pretty complex, but the win condition is just get rid of all the monsters that you're fighting. You can lose in two ways, as I said, the ticking clock. So you run out of time, which is measured by a deck. So when you run out of cards in this deck, you lose.
Okay.
The other way you can lose is if enough characters die. So there's not just your characters, there's the player characters, but also the characters that will appear in the village, the regular villagers. If they die, and that happens enough times, you lose that way as well.
Yeah, I mean, how are you supposed to save the village when the village is gone?
Yeah, there's no village to save at that point. So those are the ways you can lose, and they are pretty easy depending on the difficulty you're at.
What's a setup for the game? How would you set up a two-person game?
Yeah, so a two-person game, that's what's interesting about this game that I really like is the difficulty is so scaling. You can really choose. It's not so much about the number of players as much as how you choose to make the difficulty sit at. So the way that scales is by the number of monsters that you fight. And what's interesting in the rule book is it says, okay, so you're going to fight. If it's your first time playing, you have enough people, why don't you start with Dracula and the Creature from the Black Lagoon, and you fight them.
Okay.
And then it tells you as you progress and get better at the game, maybe any 2 monsters, any 3 monsters, any 4 monsters is a challenging game. So you can choose, mix and match all the different monsters and create your own kind of little monster mash, which is so much fun. But it also makes it more complex because all the different monsters have different goals to defeat them. And some of them are easy and some of them are very complex. So one monster could be worth the difficulty of 2 monsters.
Okay, so that's really cool. I was wondering, like, what poor town has all these 5 monsters attacking it at once? But if it's different difficulties by how many you add in, that's really cool that you can kind of pick and choose your favorite obstacles for your friends.
For sure. And I always have the Creature because he's my favorite. He's so cute and I love him. But that's what's fun is that he's like more of a simple character, so I can mix and match with a hard one. If my friends we're good at this game, we like to play, or if I'm playing with a younger crowd or people that are playing for the first time, mix them with someone that'd be easier so it's not too complicated. And that's what's so cool about this game. I love it.
And the game has the pieces to the game. There's miniatures for the monsters. There are cards I saw. Is there a board?
There is a board. So the way that the board looks, Nick, if you could pull up the board image, as well as I have some here. Oh, just a little flavor thing. It has some text on it from the back. It's the opening to the original Frankenstein from 1931. It is so good.
This is so extra, and I love it.
When you open the box, this is what's facing you, and for the first time, and it's just, I love it. So beyond just my fanboy geeking about it, this is your board. The image will come up, I'm sure, too, so you get a bit clear. But the way that it looks when you're setting it up and navigating the board is it's going to be like this. So it's the village. And the village has different locations. There's a theater, graveyard, hospital, kind of like locations from the old movies, but also generic village locations. So this is the way the board looks, and the way that the players navigate is by putting their pieces on the board, and they take actions to move around it. So you can move around this board. You have to run to the different locations and do different things, but at the same time, the monsters are moving around the board as well, and they are coming for you. And
you don't want to be on the same space as them, right?
They are scary when you run into them. Yeah, they're intimidating. So the board is this cute little village. It's really fun. The art is beautiful. And it's an interesting navigation because there's kind of two different sections, the top and the bottom, and you have to move around as quick as you can. But that can be a real challenge, as we'll see, because your player characters are not the strongest characters in any medium, I would say. They're really fun to play as, though. So if you could, Nick, jump to the player characters, that would be very handy. So these are them. There is 7 different characters you can choose from. I know you can't really see them super well. The image will come up. But there's 7 you can choose from. So there's up to 5 players, and you have more than, so everyone can have their pick. So each character has a certain number of actions, which is at the top of their card. From there is their ability underneath the picture of them. Then the role, this is the scientist, that's their name, and a starting location on the board. So we'll start with this character, the scientist. She has 4 actions. Her ability is not the best one to use for an example because I haven't got to that point yet. So why don't we take aside that? But she starts at the Institute on the board. So that will be different from where other characters start. The Explorer has only 3 actions, though. So she has 1 less than the scientist. But her ability is that she can place her hero almost anywhere on the board. So even though she has 1 less action, which can mean a lot in this game, she has a really strong ability. And that's kind of how all the characters work. They're balanced in a way where almost all of them have 4 actions. 5 of the 7 have 4 actions and kind of like, middling powers. The Explorer has 3 actions, but a very strong power. And the Mayor has 5 actions and no power.
No power.
Yeah.
So there's 7 characters for you to choose from as player characters. I was going to ask immediately if there was an old lady for me to play. So the fact that you bring the Mayor up, yeah, I'm going to play as her.
She's great. Yeah. I haven't actually ever played as her, but 5 actions. I mean, actions, you want as many as you can get in this game. The dwindling resource. But yeah, so that's how the game works. The people will choose their turn orders, they'll choose their player characters. And from there, they'll go into taking their turns. So I think the way it says in the rulebook is that you randomly choose a character. I usually just pick the ones I want to play as because that's fun. And it's a co-op game, so you don't really have to care about balancing with the other players. So you pick them. You take your little character token. So there's the Mayor for you, Lily.
Yeah.
You place them in the starting location on the board. And then you start playing. So it says in the rule book that the first player to go is the one who most recently ate garlic, which would always be me. I think when
Joke's on you, I exclusively eat garlic raw.
Which I think is such a fun little thing. But of course, anyone can kind of pick who goes first depending on what you do.
Yeah.
Especially the more challenging it gets, you want to be smart about who's going first. So if you're playing the Mayor, and you most recently ate garlic, then you go first, Lily. You'll take your turn, do your actions. All your actions are on this card. So once you use up all 5 of your actions as the Mayor, then your turn's over. You don't have to use all 5. But
I don't. Do I only get 1 action? How do I phrase this? I can do 5 actions, any actions, or can I do 5 of actions, but I don't have to do all of them?
I get you. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different actions you can take.
Okay.
And you can mix and match with your 5 actions. So you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm describing it super well, but you can choose which action you want to do. You can do multiple of the same ones. So if you want to move 5 times, you can do that. That's
Okay, good.
if you want to pick up different items, then that's an action. Stuff like that. So again, it's kind of like the Forbidden Island game where you have like limited actions. We run that Tavern of Tales. If you ever come by, it's a fun one, so play it. And you have different actions you can choose from. And you have to make those. And once you run out of them, your turn is over. You don't have to use them all in this game. I know some games make you, but you can pick and choose what you want to do. And so once one player goes and finish up their turn, then the monsters go. And this will repeat over and over. So every time you move, then the monsters take their turn after. And that means that they're moving like up. If you have 5 players, then they're moving 5 times or 4 more times for every single action you take.
That's interesting. Okay, so that's kind of unique because usually you have all your players go at once and then the obstacle, but then your monster's always moving after one of your allies moves.
Definitely.
Like
and it's tough. It's balanced really well, which is nice, where not every monster will move, but I'll get into that a bit later with the monster movements.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really interesting because you can build a plan. And then when it's your turn, your plan has completely fallen apart, even though you haven't been able to do anything because the monsters have totally moved around and shifted and gotten in your way and screwed everything up. And that happens a lot in this game. And it's really frustrating and it's so much fun, which I love. But yeah, speaking of the monsters, why don't we get into them? Because they are the lifeblood of this game. So if you could pull up the picture of the monster pieces, Nick, that would be awesome. So as I said, these are the little miniatures they got. They have these lovingly crafted little miniatures that look so much like the original costumes and suits, and they're so wonderful.
Dracula. I love Dracula so much.
He just looks so great. I mean, like, he's got his cape coming out. He has a presence. All these characters have a presence on the board, which I like. They're so much bigger and scarier than you. Except for
if I had the choice to paint these, I would definitely make Dracula look a little bit like Elton John, Rocket Man.
That would be cool. A fun, colorful Dracula. And it would definitely fit, I think, well with the fun of this game, you know, because I said it's scary in terms of panic, but it's not scary in terms of an existential dread. And it's just so much fun. And the pieces are so much fun and they're so beautiful. And I just love them. Anyway, as I was saying, so the monsters, you mix and match them. You choose which ones you want to play. There's 6 different monsters that different types of monsters to fight. I say it because there's 7 monsters, but there's 6 types because Frankenstein and his bride go together. So while there's 7 different monsters, 2 of them work together at the same time, which can make things challenging. But when you're facing them, they're one of the tougher ones.
So Frankenstein and his bride always go together, or could you take the bride off if you just want to fight Frankenstein?
Nope, you can't. You can.
True love.
Yeah, which is great because they're. I'll get into how you fight them later, but they're themed around love for each other, so it's very sweet. Even though he blows them both up in the movie, but whatever. That was the 30s, so I think the pastiche, like you said, has changed enough of that. So those are the monster pieces. They're awesome. They're so cute. But what is so cool is that each monster brings a whole bunch of items with them. So Nick, if you could go to the monster items image, you're not just coming in to face the monsters. Like, they're not going to be on the board by themselves. They have a whole swath of different things that they add to the board as well. So, for example, the Invisible Man, the Wolf Man, the Creature from the Black Lagoon, and the Mummy all have these overlays that go on top of the board and cover the spaces. And they have little things about what you need to do to defeat them. So they have all these cool different items that affect the way that they play, and they all play totally differently. They have the same kind of structure, but they're very unique in the way that they function. So, for example, I'm going to talk about one of my favorites, the coolest mechanic, which is the Mummy. If you see down here, has these kind of like slabs and hieroglyphs. And what you need to do is you'll have 6 of these on the 7 spaces, and you have to shift them around on the thing to get them to the right numbers. So this is number 3. And
I see. That's cool.
you have to get that to number 3 over here, but it might start over here. So
and you can't see what rune it is?
Yeah, you have to flip these over at first, and then you have to move them around and finish the puzzle. So it can take you a very long time if you're not thinking ahead. And you only have a certain amount of times you can do that. So, I don't want to complicate and rush into necessarily how all the creatures work, but they all have their different things. And
it looks like you should definitely go over Frankenstein and Frankenstein's bride and the creature in a little bit, just because these are so interesting. Each monster has its unique win condition. Yeah,
they're all so unique. And I will talk about Frankenstein and the bride because I love them. Nick, if you could jump ahead to the monsters image. This is what the cards all look like. So these will be placed next to the board, and you're going to have the monsters you're fighting placed there. So this is Creature from Black Lagoon. If you're facing him and the Wolfman, they'll both be next to the board. The rest of them just go back in the box. These will have all the win conditions. So the way that you fight each monster is that they each have 2 phases to defeat them. One is to complete the first step in order to make them vulnerable, and the second is to actually go and fight them and defeat them. I say defeat, but it's pretty open-ended. Like, you're not killing all of them. You're staking Dracula, which is good, but Frankenstein the bride, you don't kill. The creature you don't kill. The Wolfman you cure. So it's very nice. It's not like it's coming in from this place of like vanquishing the monsters. It's really a love for them, and I love that. For the creature, it says you have to get him away because he keeps coming into the village. So you just send him away, scattering for the water, I guess. You hear that, players? You don't always have to be murder hobos to save the day. Only if it's Dracula, then you have to kill him. But if it's Dracula, he needs to go. All right. Like the Invisible Man, you just need to put him in jail and stuff. But I like Frankenstein the Bride because they have this interesting little thing. So at the bottom here, it's kind of hard to see when I have to hold it up, but they each have a dial, and you place that here. And every time you meet them, you have to use certain items to increase their humanity and teach them how to love. So once you get to the very end and you've gotten both of them to the top of their charts, you have to get them together, and then they will be happy and leave the village. So you're setting up the monsters that are trying to kill your village so that they can find true love. And also you're trying to be like, yo, maybe don't do that. Yeah. Here's how to be human. I do like that because it's really sweet. If you know Frankenstein's story, Frankenstein is very sympathetic and stuff like that, and deserves all the happiness. And they're so sweet. Frankenstein's monster, not Dr. Frankenstein. Yeah. Dr. Frankenstein can go die. I love this because in the book it says, we know it's the doctor. No one cares about that. And, I totally agree. It's Frankenstein, At least this one is. Good boy. All right. He's a good boy. So you have to increase their humanity, and once they get together, then you have to move them near each other in order to make them be happily ever after. But if they get together before you do that, then they go on a rampage and they get angry and they start attacking people. So you have to keep them apart, while also, trying to get near them yourself so that you can increase their humanity, and then at the end, pull them together. So it's really fun. And all the monsters have these different mechanisms like that, where they all have different ways of navigating the board. They all have different defeat conditions. And when there's like 4 of them, or even like 2 or 3, the amount of different conditions is really kind of overwhelming, where you have to worry about so many different things at once and so many monsters all converging on you. Is it possible to play with all the monsters? I don't think you could win. I think it's impossible. I don't know. It might be possible. I might not just be thinking creatively enough, but they call it very challenging, getting 4 monsters out of the 6. I don't think you could play with all of them and win, although it might be a fun experience anyway, just to do. Just to mess with your friends. Yeah, there's no cops around. They won't stop you if you want to go ahead and do that.
This sounds so cool. All right.
And it's super, so all of them at different conditions, some of them more complicated than others, and that's how you kind of want to mix and match depending on if you want to challenge yourself or you just kind of want to have a fun time. But the ways that you have to defeat them, like I said, they each have a phase where you have to make them vulnerable and then a phase where you have to do something to defeat them. And the way that you do that, if you could jump to the item bag image, Nick, is through these items. And these things are the most frustrating part of this game because you need them and you need them so much and they're never enough. No matter what point you're at, you're constantly scrambling. I just need more, and they never give you enough of them. And I love them because they're so fun for that reason. You know, like the way that they work is that they each have a different strength. So this one has a strength of 5. The rapier has a strength of 5, so that one's really strong. That's probably one of the strongest ones.
You could find that in the theater, it seems like, some stage combat.
Yeah, stage combat. So the theater is where it will be located when you pull it out of this bag. This is an RNG element, so like a random element.
Ooh. So you pull from the bag and then you put it on the place when you pull it.
Exactly. So at the beginning of every monster turn, you'll add more of these. And that might sound like a lot at the beginning of every monster turn, but these run out so fast. And so there's different colors. There's blue, yellow, and red. They need to be mixed and matched and different strengths. So you need to collect as many as you can of higher strengths because those can be used against the monsters really well. For example, when you're going to Frankenstein the Bride, if you play a blue or a yellow, you can move it up that dial I said. You move that one up the number of the strength at the top.
Okay.
So if I play this, then I can move it 2 because this is a strength of 2. And then I can move them 2 spaces away because of that strength. So you want to collect the higher, stronger ones and, you know, try and collect as many as you can, but they're all constantly being thrown all around the board. And they're constantly scattering. So you have to rush around to different locations with your already feeble number of actions you can do, and then collect them, which takes an action, and then try and pull them to the right place. So some monsters need certain items from certain locations and certain colors and stuff.
So how many items do you pull on each monster's turn? Just one, or is it multiple?
It's multiple. I believe it's 2 to 3. It might be more. I don't quite remember, but it's not a... It's a pretty good balance number. It's not too much. It's not too little. The only thing is that not only are these what you need to defeat the monsters in every way, they're also your health. So
okay, yeah.
They're not just an objective, but you need them to stay alive. Because when you're attacked by a monster, for the number of hits they do, you can either die immediately from one hit, or you can sacrifice the number of items for the number of hits. So if they hit you 3 times, you have to get rid of 3 of these items that you really need, or you can just die. And if you die, you get that much closer to losing because it moves up the timer.
So if you die, are you out of the game, but the rest of your friends still playing?
Nope, you just start at the hospital, but so it's like there's no player elimination in that way, but you take a pretty big hit in terms of you're going to have much.
Right, so that's pretty good because I've always hated being that one person that kind of got screwed over who, you know, in the early game, you kind of have to wait.
It's not fun.
Yeah. So that's a pretty cool mechanic. It's a cool kind of way to punish the player for not for choosing poorly.
Yeah.
Their choice on the board.
The first time I played the game, I didn't know that was the rules. I thought it was player elimination, so I stayed dead for like half an hour.
Oh no. And then all your friends failed because you weren't helping them.
They actually won by the skin of their teeth. And we would have won so much sooner if I knew that I could just come back to life. But it was fun to watch anyway. It was very exciting. And even though I'm like not a rule book reader, I get so like my eyes glaze over, but this rule book has a little like weird things. I had to go online to clarify some rules, but it's good for the most part. And it's like very concise and it's good read, which I always appreciate.
I'm very much a person that learns playing through. And I think as cool as this game is, the fact that the monsters have their own unique play style would definitely mess me up a little bit. But now that I know that's the case,
it's a challenge at first when you're learning it, and especially because even when you do learn them and you know how each monster functions, remembering like more than one monster at a time it can be so much effort, especially when you only have like 4 players, which sounds like a lot, but if you're dividing them into teams of 2, it's not.
But you can play by yourself on
Mm,
your own during quarantine if you buy this game
that's
and figure out which monsters you like playing best, so that
mm.
when you do introduce this game to your friends, you can be like, man, I don't like any of you guys. Here's the here's Frankenstein and his bride.
Yeah. The mummy, the frustrating
Oh, is
mummy.
the mummy the hardest? Yeah, mummy does sound pretty hard.
The mummy is the hardest. Frankenstein the Bride are tough, but it's more like of a just rushing around. The mummy is just like, actually, but for me, I've had the worst luck with the Wolfman, who is scary because, and this is just a fun little thing. He has a thing where he gets like
Puppy.
he gives you a like a token where he will only chase you down, and that makes it so hard because it takes one player basically out because they're constantly being attacked and constantly being chased by him, which is very stressful.
Yeah.
So he's tough, and his thing is hard because you have to find the cure and you have to go grab items from different places and bring them back. Oh, Nick, if you want to jump to the item board image, should have done that a bit ago. But yeah, so you have to rush around and collect all these items from different locations. As you see in the image, there's one in the graveyard, one in the church. So that's how it looks like on the board. They can stack up massively, so they'll start to be like several different items on each square. Luckily, going to one location, you can grab all the items in one action, so it's not super punishing with that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just keeping those items is the hard part, and moving around the board without being attacked constantly is not always easy. And
You don't have an item limit, do you?
no, you can have as many as you want. Yeah,
Okay.
it's just you won't always have as much as you want. You might have way more than you need. But also, I believe there are cards that can punish you for having too many. No, there's cards that punish you for having too many that you haven't picked up yet, though, on the board. Which is the Invisible Man comes and causes some trouble and destroys them. So it's always fun. Yeah, and so speaking of monsters and then moving around, I want to talk about how they take their turns, because this is a really interesting mechanic, and it's a really cool way of balancing the fact that they take their turns so often that after every player they're moving. It's cool that they found a very good way to balance that, which if you could jump to the monster cards image, Nick, that would be super helpful. So if you're looking at this image, there's 2 different types of cards for the monsters. There's an action card and then a villager arrival card. I'll explain villagers after because they are more complex part of it, but they are like something that adds a lot more stress. So if you look at a typical monster card, the image there, it has at the top a number. So for this one, it's the 2. That's the number of items you're going to put on the board when you pull this card. And so it runs 2, 3. Yeah, it's 2, 3, and 0 are the number of items that can go on the board. And that 0 is never fun. So when first you what you do is you take care of this card in the order from top to bottom. So first you put the items on the board. Then you take the action it says. So for this one, if you're playing with Dracula, it says place Dracula in the space with the current player's hero. So you'll have to resolve that by moving Dracula to the space of whoever drew this card, which isn't fun. And then at the bottom is how monsters move. So you'll see here, Louis, there's 3 different icons. They each represent different monsters. So first you have, I believe that's Anubis.
It's Anubis, yeah, that's a mummy. A green thing, which looks maybe the swamp thing. I guess that's a lagoon.
The bride, actually.
Oh, it's the bride. There you go, your bride.
Yeah,
and the Invisible Man.
Yes, exactly. So you're going to resolve each in a row. Each of these monsters will take 1 move and roll with 2 dice.
Okay.
So that's how it works. It will say you might not be playing with all of these monsters, but whichever ones you are playing with will take that 1 movement and then rolling 2 dice. They only roll dice if they land on a space with another player. And when they do, that's when it gets scary. But for this card, it moves Dracula, so it has a kind of weak movement, only 1. So they're only going to move 1 space. Okay. However,
if you aren't playing with Dracula, you would bypass that part of the card.
Exactly. Yep. You would just skip over it if you're not playing with him, and then resolve on the bottom. So what's interesting is that because this one moves Dracula, you'll notice at the bottom he doesn't move. So even though he moves to your space, he won't attack you on that turn. So it does give you some breathing room, which is nice. However, he might attack you on the next turn, and at that point, you can't move anyway. So it's can be pretty scary. So the way that the monsters work is that they're always going to move towards the nearest character. And how that works, it's either a player or the aforementioned villagers, who I'll explain. So they will always prioritize moving towards player characters. So if there's one nearby and equidistant from a villager and a hero, they'll always go for the player characters. However, if the villager's closer, they go for the villager. So you have to move them closer. You move them with your hand, you do it on your own. And then you have to resolve the things at the bottom. So you'll move them one, and then if they land on the space with a player or a villager, then you roll the dice and resolve that action. So as I said, on the other card, that has 3 on the top, and then it says a villager arrives, and it tells you where the villager goes. I'll get into them in a second.
Okay.
The next thing, though, what's interesting is that you'll see on the bottom of this card, there is a little fire, which doesn't represent any of the monsters. That is the frenzy marker, and this will go on any monster there's a numerical order on the monster cards of who gets it first. And it will go on a monster. Once that monster is defeated, it'll move to the next monster. And whoever has this token will move whenever that fire moves. So even though it can be a totally different monster every turn, but that can mean that a monster is moving very often, because this comes up quite often. The monsters only seem to come up like once every 3 or 4 cards, like an individual monster, but the fire seems to come up every other card or something. So that monster that has that fire is going to be moving a lot, and they're very dangerous. So yep, that's how the frenzy, and then I'll move on to the dice. So Nick, if you could jump to the dice image. The dice have 3 different symbols on them. They have a kind of hit marker. They have an exclamation point.
Whoops.
Blank. Yes, like a pow, bam, like Batman from the 60s, my favorite. And what you do is once you get to the monster arrives at a space with a player villager, and it says the number of dice, you roll that number of dice. If it lands on a hit, then it takes that number of damage. For every wham bam whatever hit that it lands on, you'll take that number of
2 dice, you get 2 whoops hits. So that means they have to get rid of 2 items or die, go to the hospital.
Yes, you can only take 1 hit. So if one of these hits you and you have no items, you're done.
You're done.
If 2 of them hit you and you have 1 item, then you just save your item and just take the L and go to the hospital, respawn.
Yeah. Okay, so you don't have to get rid of your item.
No, you don't have to. That's right. Yeah, you don't have to get rid of your items. You can take the loss and just go to the hospital and respawn. But again, that will make things scarier in the long run. Mm-hmm. And finally, blank just means nothing. Or not finally, but the blank just means nothing. It's really nice when you roll those.
Yeah, never have I wanted to see the blank dark void of an empty-sided dice.
It's so nice. It's like 2 out of the 6 sides are blank, so it's not the highest odds, and 3 of the 6, half of them are the hits, and then the 1 is this exclamation point, which each monster has a different ability. It says on their cards. Once you land on that, you resolve that. It's not super complicated, but they can be pretty frightening when you run into them. Like they will push back your progress basically on defeating that monster.
And the monster cards, the highest number of dice you can roll is 3?
Yes, up to 3. Okay. That's all the game comes with anyways, 3 dice. Mostly it's like 2 and 1, but yeah, there are some 3s.
Couple 3s.
Yeah, so
the really get fucked.
Yeah.
It's right there, just saying.
You hit all 3 at once, you're in for a bad time if you don't have many items.
Just take the L at that point. Just be the beating man.
Just take the L. Yep, so that's how the dice work and how monster attacks work. So they're constantly moving towards you, constantly attacking. And the more monsters you have, the more they're going to move and attack. So that's where the scaling difficulty comes in.
Okay, so you have your player characters, but you said there's a bunch of villagers as well that are going to be moving Are they on the map? Are they moving around the map? Do players move them? Or are they just vibing?
So Nick, if you could jump to the villagers image, they are not vibing. They are targets. They are.
Oh, they be freaking out because there's a monster in their midst. Got it.
When I said that this was the most frustrating part of the game, but fun, that wasn't a lie. But this is the most frustrating part of the game that just makes me gnaw my teeth. And I'm like, I'm having fun, but I'm not having that much fun because this adds such a huge level of stress to the game. When you draw a villager card, it will say once you resolve putting the items, then it will tell you where to move them. So this one says Professor Pearson is going to be moved to the cave. So you will take Professor Pearson and you will put him on the cave. Your job then, as the players, is to take that character. If you'll see in the image that is brought up on the screen, it's Maria, who is right here. She is the girl that Frankenstein threw into the water in the movie. Everyone remembers that scene, the girl that he killed. She's alive here, but maybe not for long. So she will spawn at the barn. Your mission then is to bring her to the camp. So you have to go to the barn, take her with you to the camp, all while avoiding the monsters, which is so difficult because the board is pretty linear in a lot of ways. There's some ways you can move around, but there's really only two main paths. And it's tough. Your best bet is to run past the monsters.
So you'll go to where Maria is at the barn, and then you'll move away with her escorting her, essentially?
Yeah, so it's an escort mission, basically, like in a game, where you have to bring them there. And at that point, once they do arrive safely, then you get an ability card. These just give you different abilities, not super complicated. They will help you a lot, though, throughout the game. But the thing is, when these villagers can just keep spawning and you're trying to take care of the monsters and they just keep coming. And when you're not nearby, if you're avoiding the monsters go for the villagers. Mm-hmm. And when they land on the space, if they roll any attack, they have no means of defending themselves. They immediately die. And then when a character dies, like I said, it moves along the timer. So you're even closer to just automatically losing. And it's so frustrating because you have like 5 at once and you just know that you can't take care of it and you're rushing around trying to save all of them. But
can you escort more than one character at a time?
That's a good point. So the way that they move is through actions. So one of your actions is to escort them with you. So when you have one of them with you, like it doubles the amount of movement actions you have because you have to move and move them with you.
Oh, that's terrible. That's amazing and terrible. And I hate NPCs now.
They're just awful. And it's so frustrating. And it just drives you nuts. But It's really fun, too, when you actually can manage to move them. But sometimes you just want them to go away. And so you can focus on the monsters. But that's a fool's errand. But it's fun because they're all like little references to the old movies, which is really cool. Like, Maria, the girl he threw in the water, Renfield, that Dracula hypnotized. Fritz the Hunchback.
Is there? Yeah, there is an Igor in there, huh?
Yeah.
Look at that.
The OG Igor. And Maliva, the gypsy from the Wolfman movies. Oh, they're just great.
So, and these are, all right, so as annoying as it is to escort these characters, them dying is what brings the lose condition closer, right? The terror tracker, I think you had mentioned.
Yes. So the terror tracker, Nick, if you could jump to the terror tracker image, is this scary little thing at the top of the board, this little timer. It's got a spooky skull, and it starts at number 1. Every time a player character or a villager dies, it moves up. And once it gets to the skull at the end, which is 7 moves, which means, I guess, 7 deaths, then it's game over, just automatically. So when you have like 4 villagers you're trying to take care of, and they just start being picked off like flies, you can just lose like so much faster than you were anticipating. And it's your fault, right? You should have taken better care of them. But
it's like, well, damn, I guess it's time for me to move out of Wallachia because Dracula's killing everybody.
It's
time to move.
I know these villagers. I love them because they're these awesome, wonderful little art references to the old, but they're just also so frustrating, but they're fun. It adds a whole nother element where it throws you off your game And I think that's what this game does so well, is it makes you panic and freak out. You die in one hit. The lose conditions are so simple and the win conditions are so complex. There's so many moving parts and so many things happening at once, and you're rushing around the board trying to take care of all this stuff, and you just can't do it. Even when you have all of a great team and you're like, oh, you need to go and take care of this, but I can't. I need to go and do that. And you're like, but we need that or else we're going to lose. Well, we need to do this or else we're going to lose. And it's just rushing around and it's making you panic.
I love this. This seems like a nightmare for people with ADHD, but it does seem like, despite all of this happening at once, the mechanics of it are very simple. Now that I've had you explain everything, like, I could do this. Yeah. I just have to remember everything.
It's like a 10 plus game is what the age is recommended. And it really is. It feels like it's that age range. It's simple once you play it. You understand once you get through. You know how the game works at its base. And then the complexities build on top of that, which is so cool and interesting.
Yeah, it seems like kids or younger kids would be able to grasp onto this fairly easy. And then it's also not too scary for them either. So like you can kind of introduce them to horror.
Yeah, and that's what these movies are so great for, is that if you're squeamish like me, I am so easily frightened, but I can watch these movies all the time because they're not like scary in the traditional sense, but they're sweet and emotional and frightening in a way where you're seeing, you know, things get hurt and it makes you sad. It's like watching a puppy, and it's like, but you just love the characters and the monsters, and the art is so fantastic and beautiful.
If you just play the Wolfman as your enemy, you have a puppy chasing you the entire time.
Oh my gosh, you're right. Poor Larry Talbot. Just took it away from that curse, but you can save him in this game, which is, you know, so nice. It took them like 7 movies to do it in the 40s, but you can do it in one night.
What's the game length for this? Does it take about an hour, 2 hours? Is it dependent on the monster?
Yeah, it depends. No, not really, because this deck is like a timer. So it's always going to be about the same. It depends on how many players are in more than it does the monsters. So yeah, like, although I guess that will also affect as well. But the game can be played, I would say it's about 45 to an hour if you're quick. Your first time, like any board game, is going to be a bit longer. I think I have a skewed perspective because I don't think I've ever played this more than once. I've played this many times with different groups. So it's hard to say, but I think I would say about 45 to an hour and a half. And that's being generous on both sides, probably somewhere in the middle. Yeah, about an hour.
You need to bring this into Tot so that we can all play this. This is what I'm hearing.
It's so much fun. It's a blast. And I mean, it is beautiful. I can't say how beautiful it is. It's so pretty and full of love and passion for those monsters. And, you know, they've had such, I'm getting emotional. They've had such an effect on our pop culture. And, you know, it's whenever people think of Halloween, they think of Frankenstein, Dracula, you know, the Monster Master.
Zombies and stuff like that. Zombies, devils, just like typical horror stuff, right?
Yeah, but this is the original typical horror stuff, right? Like, you know, not devils and stuff like that, but those
literature and stories, tropes are so built on these characters. So
yeah. And it's crazy. It just blows my mind how present they are in our pop culture, but kind of how much they get kind of like a sideline. You know, they're not as, they don't get as much attention, I think, as they deserve. And I love them, and I wish that they would get more attention. So we've been going through a resurgence. There's like every 30 years, there's a resurgence of like Universal Monsters stuff, which is crazy. Like first you had in the 50s and 60s about the same, and then in the 80s and 90s, and now we're going through it again.
We've talked about this actually, like the 30-year turn, essentially, where certain aesthetics and communities will like resurge because people will find their interests in that, and that's so cool.
Yeah, and it's great. I'd love to see them coming back in full force. And you know, you have like the Mummy movie and the Invisible Man out now. Like they're kind of, you know, they always have a place in our pop culture, and it's such a joy that. Like I'm able to marry board games, something I love, with those characters, which I love. And just, you know, looking at these faces, it's like, oh, they're so cool. And so like, you know, they just meant a lot to me growing up and stuff. So it's like, it's such a fun game to play because it's so loving, and it doesn't feel in any way. Like there's not that sense of violence where you're defeating them and like, you're trying to help them, or you're just trying to help this little village and you're playing hero, and it's great. It just marries a lot of.
I wouldn't categorize. It's so tough to say that this is a horror. It definitely is a horror, but it's like it's camp horror.
Yeah.
Not say horror.
It's a creature feature, monster
Creature
movies.
feature. There you go.
Yeah, which is like so cool because like, those movies aren't really horror movies in the way that we think of them now. Like they're monster movies, which is so
Because
different.
you know what? It's less about the horror and more about working within your community, or working to see how, or in these movies, it's how communities fell apart because they weren't either accepting or they failed to do whatever.
Yeah, like the whole sense of community. I think that's what's so sweet about it, is that like all of like these characters, and Guillermo del Toro, who I love, he mentioned it best when The Shape of Water was coming out, which he originally wanted to make about the creature from Black Lagoon. Is he said like, these movies have a lot of empathy in them for the monsters. They're not like slashers of the 80s. They're not like something so kind of mean and it's like frightening in a way, which, I don't want to paint like a judgment on that either, because people love different things for different reasons. It's just that it's so nice to see something that's so loving and sweet and empathetic.
I have so many feelings about creature features from an analyzation standpoint and a cultural standpoint, because I mean, creature features can be, at least in Hollywood and American history, very problematic. Which is why The Shape of Water was so interesting, because Del Toro kind of like put that empathy back into it. Whereas in the past, as much as I love the camp and the horror, it's very much an othering.
Yeah.
And when you're a person who's like, oh man, what what inspiration created this othering for these monsters? And that's hugely problematic. But it's why it's interesting when you have people create games like these, or create narratives that are like, hey, how do we change it so that we can save the wolf man and cure him?
Yeah.
Or, the invisible man might have had an invisible ability, but he chose to do evil. So of course he needs to go to jail and have the accountability and repercussions of that.
Yeah, it's so nice. Like you're saying, that kind of bringing the life back into it, which I feel like has been happening a lot lately. And, I think it's really, it's a fool's errand to try and separate the politics from this kind of stuff, right? Like you're saying, the othering in the sense, like, again, coming back to Guillermo del Toro, just because when it comes to Shape of Water, he's, he hits all these points. He's talking about how he felt like he could connect with the creature from the Black Lagoon, how he felt empathy for it. And sure, the creature from Black Lagoon, the original movie, is like trying to kidnap this woman and take her. But at the same time, like, that's not necessarily, that is something that was being portrayed the other in so many ways. And the movie still had empathy for him in a weird way, even though they shoot him at the end. And
yeah,
it upsets me because I think that movie, I love the Gill Man and I love the suit design. It could be a lot more intelligent, but it was the 50s. The rest of these were the rest of these were the Great Depression, wartime. They were a lot different. The creature from Black Lagoon's a lot different. But anyway, I could go on for a long time.
It's almost the end of this talks, and I could go about queer theory and horror and monsters for hours.
It's I think the most interesting lens to look through it at, because it just brings such a, it's not new, it's always been there, but it feels like it's getting heard a lot more. And I really appreciate, that kind of stuff. Like it's so refreshing and not only different, but more true to people's experience than a lot of other ways. Not just looking at the way the movies are shot or the suit designs, which I love, but at the same time, the empathy and the emotions behind it, which is, what monsters spark in all of us. And
I worked in a haunted house for a while. It's a lot of fun to dress up as a monster. Just to be that monster and then to move differently and like unsettle people, if not terrify them.
It's a great exercise, and like it's an out-of-body experience to be a monster.
This game's really, really cool. There's a lot of similarities to it that I noticed to games like Dead of Winter. which we've been working on
Mm,
doing stuff for, especially with the terror tracker is
mm.
kind of similar to the time sensitivity with Dead of Winter, but Dead of Winter doesn't have that monster moving after every single player like with uh, Horrified, and I kind of like this for the
Yeah.
simplicity of it.
I think like Dead of Winter, I couldn't
It's a
speak a
different
lot
aesthetic
on.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't speak a lot on it because I'm not super familiar. I haven't played it myself, although I've seen like the beginnings of a game being played at
It's a
Tavern.
long game. Yeah.
Um,
You've never been able to sit through a whole game, huh?
we've been trying, but it gets busy. um, but I think that it's very thematic and it's trying to tell a story, like about these people being trapped, which is a very cool horror element. This is more of like you said, a campy, fun monster movie where you're fighting off these monsters, but again, I think what makes it so different is that you can't separate it, even the gameplay, from the monsters themselves and the history that they have, and looking at them brings so much life and character to this game. And I keep talking about the art, but oh my god, it's pretty. It is so full of life and color, and it's a joy to play, and I love it.
I have one more question. The most important question. When you play this game in person with your friends, absolutely, what is the best playlist of music to listen to so you can get them in the mood? Do you think you should create a playlist for every monster? Do you think you should just have Monster Mash on repeat until they defeat the monster?
I do. So I'm a big pinball fan, and the in the 90s there was a Universal Monsters pinball game called Monster Bash. I used the opening music at the beginning of this stream. But that actually you have to go in, you have to get all the monsters activated in that game. So they all have their own soundtrack in that game. So I use that one a lot. But I think that this is a game that doesn't lend itself well to atmospheric horror like Dead of Winter or Black Mass, but more to a fun, upbeat, like action horror, like with like more like Monster Mash, the song, like kind of something fun. So I tend to use like a lot of video game music, like
Mhm.
Banjo Kazooie or Mario, because they have these levels that are like you go through a haunted house, but they're also still fun and upbeat. So that tends to work the best in my experience, if you know
Yeah,
what I mean.
the horror isn't existential, you said, like a lot of the other horror games.
It's more of the
That's what
idea.
I love, psychological and existential horror.
Yeah. It's more of the idea. It's like it's gothic horror, but it's also become even more than that, where it's like it's fun and action oriented in a way more.
It's very proactive. I
Yeah.
feel like the players, with everything that you mentioned, the players have an idea and they know what they're going to do, so there's hope
Yeah.
and the ability to
you,
do that. That's so cool.
you love to play the hero. It's so fun.
We all just want to be big damn heroes and for Frankenstein and his bride to fall in love and live happily ever after.
But that's being a real hero. You could kill them, but then who are you? You're no
Who are
better than
you?
the angry mob.
A true hero is going to bring people together.
Exactly. Unless it's Dracula, then you got to kill him because
Nah, fuck boy need to go.
he's no good. Yeah, that's Horrified. I can't recommend it enough. It's a lot of fun and it's great.
Right. So it's like what you said, it was about $30.
Yeah, it's pretty cheap.
See if you can find it at a local, look online to your local game store, call them up to be like, hey, you got this game? 'Cause I want it.
And
Looks really fun. Said
for
it
the
takes
price, you
sorry?
get a lot of good stuff. I just want
Yeah.
to say that.
I want to paint all of those miniatures. The moment you took them out, and I'm like, those are some bare-faced miniatures right there.
So good. I know. I can't believe, like, on a website, this could be over $100 for all of these, but they're good quality and they're very lovingly created.
Those are so cool.
Yeah.
All right. So that's the hour that we have talking about Horrified. Thank you guys for coming to our Tavern Talks with this wonderful game. Donovan, thank you.
Horace, it was a pleasure.
Again, I'll just go through our whole spiel. We are Tavern of Tales. We're an immersive game board bar in Boston that is unfortunately closed, but hopefully in the coming weeks, months, when things are finally free to open up again, we'll be able to see you guys and talk about these more in person. We are Twitch affiliated, so we hope that you guys like, follow, subscribe, all that fun stuff. If you didn't manage to catch our full stream for this or any of our previous Tavern Talks, you can catch them on YouTube when we have them uploaded. Should be in just a couple of days. We have our Eberron D&D campaign ongoing. Our second season is in the midst and starting up strong. We have our session tonight for people that are signed up. And if anybody else wants to sign up and create characters, you're welcome to. They are on Monday for our signups, and please check out our Discord for that, because we have a lot of very awesome, lovely players that it's worth making friends with at the very least, and a lot of DMs that are willing to help you with D&D questions or character creation or even backstory building, because we're so creative and nuts like that. We'd love to help you. We have our Shattered Land homebrew stream with our DM Jake and all of our game masters as PCs, including myself, on Wednesdays and Fridays from 6 to 9. They're lovely. Things are going to be ramping up with that pretty soon, it seems. We have Magic the Gathering Arena with Tyler on Mondays and Thursdays from 3 to 6, where Tyler is their goofy self, lovable goofy, playing amazing music and totally beating ass with Magic the Gathering. And I think that's it. Do we have anything else? We have another Tavern Talks on Tuesday upcoming. We haven't figured out who our new DM that we're going to discuss with is yet, but a lot of interesting talks going to be going on that Tuesday as well at 1 p.m.
Awesome.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for showing Horrified, Donovan, and I hope to see everybody again next time.
Take care, guys. Thanks for showing up.